So I wanted to make a video, I was just called to make this video about what is awakening and how to make it more tangible. I know as I was progressing through my spiritual awakening, there was a lot of abstract nature to it. It was like I don't really even know what I'm doing. And so whether you're awakening, you're healing, you're on a self-help journey, whatever else, if you're drawn to this message, what I hope to get across in this message is to define it in a more tangible way, to make it easier to understand kind of where you are, what's happening, where you're going. And I don't know personally, you have your own journey, but these are the elements that I found, and some of the elements that have made it extraordinarily easier to understand was the tangibility of definition, because things get twisted when we start to have discourse and we continue to look at different spiritual beliefs and that sort of thing. So I'm just going to take it on lots of things. I wanted to talk about healing and trauma. What are they? An easier way to look at what's actually going on. And so I might have you do some visualizations as we go through this. And I also wanted to talk about what it feels like. So I will assume that if you're watching this video, you've had spiritual ahas. You feel it's just a sensation, and you tell people like, oh my gosh, something happened to me, and I feel awakened, or I feel there's something different about you. And I wanted to talk about how to kind of look at that process and kind of move through this to give tangibility. So let's start with trauma and healing. And there's a lot of people that choose to be on a healing path on their awakening. They call it that, or they're healing trauma. And so they use those terms, trauma and healing. So what is actually going on when this happens? What is trauma? So as soon as something comes up, humans like to define things, and they like to define things in stories. So if you notice that people talk about trauma, they talk about childhood trauma, they talk about relationship trauma, abusive trauma. And what is trauma? What is trauma? And how can we move through it? And what is healing? What is actually happening when we're healing? So trauma. So let's visualize kind of your timeline. And so I have this vision of me, and I'm linearly going through time. And this is the time I was born to the time I'm making this video for you. And so there's like this trajectory of a kind of like a mesh of all the stories and everything that is about me, but it's in this one path. So let's just use one traumatic event, because trauma can be over time, and it can also be just a traumatic event. Something happens, a loved one dies. So I'll just use it from my perspective of, let's just say, a traumatic event happened at one time. So if you have this vision of kind of like a 3D web of like a timeline, and the web is interconnected with all the stories that my mind has told me, all the connections I've made with other people, but it's my trajectory through that. So what ends up happening with that event that happened, the trauma was like an imprint into that mesh, and that changes the trajectory, and that changes the perspective that I have from this traumatic event. So one of the most powerful things that I know that I did along my way is I stopped using the term trauma. And that's because I saw how people were using the term trauma. And I recognized that people were actually re-traumatizing themselves over and over again by rehashing what it was, this imprint that happened. So I started using the term imprint because I know that that's all it is an imprint. Something happened. And then if I just look at it, instead of telling a story about it, how I feel about it, what I think about it, rather, actually, I want to get to where I feel. I have the sense of the feelings from that imprint. And so to have an imprint, to understand that we have that imprint, it's just an imprint that changed the trajectory of our experience here on Earth as human beings. And so the tangible understanding of that is something happened traumatically, and that changed the trajectory. So, but now I'm here in this moment, and how do I recognize that it's affecting me? I'm not going where I want to go. Or I recognize, you can look back and go, okay, my life changed when this event happened. And when I go and revisit this imprint that happened in my life, this traumatic imprint happened in my life, I had a downward trajectory in my happiness, my enjoyment, these kind of things. And sometimes we wake up to these and we don't even realize that they've happened. But that's what I want to share with you. And this is the beautiful thing. If we don't work with trauma from a story aspect, and that's what humans want to do, is they want to tell a story. They want to find certainty and come to conclusions about that. So let's just take example A. I have this traumatic event, and then I realize that brought me down. And now I learn about trauma, and I go out and I say, okay, this event changed my life. And then I just keep telling that story. I keep telling that story to myself, and I keep telling it to everybody else. I had this happen to me. I had this happen to me. I had this happen to me. Well, what we're really doing is re-traumatizing ourselves and connecting ourselves to this story. So basically, we have the imprint when it happened, and then we have this realization that, oh, this made a big difference in my life. And then we start telling that story, the traumatic story about my trauma. And we reinforce the sensations that we have in this situation. So example B is I take a different path and I go, oh, okay, I think that this experience, I can feel the downward trajectory from when I had this experience. Okay, now I understand that this was a traumatic event. This was get rid of the trauma story, and we just say, okay, had an imprint. And what did that imprint do? What it does is it influences our emotional guidance system. So if we focus on our emotional guidance system, then we're looking at, okay, I had this thing that happened to me, and it made an imprint. So now I'm here and I want to heal this. Well, what does healing mean? Well, let's just get rid of the word healing and say, what does it take for me to understand what happened here? Because that's the thing about being human, is we think that we know. We know exactly what happened. And the problem, and a bigger problem is when we go out and we identify it. This happened to me because of such and such. Then we identify it, and then we continue to find people who identify with it. And then we keep reinforcing this conclusion that we have. And we're just like, I have to get up every day with this thing that happened that we do. And then we just continue to re-traumatize ourselves and hold ourselves to that reality. And even worse, sometimes we don't actually awaken. We actually are closing ourselves down into even tighter bonds and belief systems. So I got rid of the term healing as well, because I recognize that it had a lot to do, because we have this idea of healing with our bodies, like our body, how long it takes for our body. So if I cut myself, I got to wait so much time for that cut to heal. And when you recognize that psychological, let's say, illness is different, and it can be different, what actually is happening when you're healing that trauma? It is simple awareness. What we are trying to do is, we have this imprint. And if we say, I know exactly what it was, we remain in a static belief system, and we keep imprinting and being imprint by this. The thing about awakening is we want to awaken from where this took us in a path that we didn't prefer. So letting go of these terms is a really great idea. Even though you can look at it and I can say, yeah, that's exactly what's happening is healing. But really what is actually happening is the awakening is simple awareness. And my personality, my I, never healed a thing. I could not heal anything if I wanted to. And that's one thing that's very important to understand, is my I, whatever I identify, my ego, whatever, cannot heal anything. Awareness, because it's just an imprint. And it's simply finding out and bringing awareness to this impact of this imprint. And what does this imprint do? It imprints an emotional charge into that experience. Well, so your mind says, I never want to experience this again because that felt really bad. And then it just creates the reality beyond that. But as soon as we start waking up, we want to look at that and just to be able to sit in the emotions that happened from that experience. And sitting in those is simply, that is what awakening is finding out, sitting with our own emotions. There's nobody outside of us. Now we can have guides. This video could be a guide to help you do that, but you have to do this. You have to bring awareness to this yourself. And the way that we do that, it isn't going to happen in the mind. It has to happen by how we feel. We are sensory beings. And so we are guided, and in Lenzafarianism, we make things tangible. So people define emotions and feelings very differently. And so we define in Lenzafarianism, emotions are the unconscious, basically what we don't know. So if we look at this imprint from the eyes of, I don't know what happened here. Because the minute that I start making conclusions about it, it will reinforce this, and we become stagnant, and we create a static system. And so in Lenzafarianism, the magic of Lenzafarianism is to work with our emotions, to realize that we have an EGS, an emotional guidance system, and we're working with our emotions. So it's not a matter of being upset with our emotions at all. It's like being angry at our anger. It doesn't work. It is about getting in touch with and being with one and resting in, making practices where we sit with emotions, the things we don't know, anger, sadness, fear. These are the things that arise from emotions, the unconscious. And we're trying to make the unconscious conscious, what we don't know into what we do know. And another way to identify it is that when we take all these paths to get away from emotion, to try to repress emotion, and there's belief systems that are all based upon doing that. And then there's just the hey, I'm just going to find the softest way. We're trying to find the most bubble wrapped way to get through life. And that's not how awakening happens. Awakening happens from diving into these emotions and working with those emotions. So really an awakening path and healing path, however you want to say it, is about stopping ignoring. Stop ignoring our emotions. To actually see and start to look at them as our guidance system. It's exciting when you get this. I understand that people that are just getting started go, I don't like this. It's heavy and it's hard. But it is what spiritual awakening is. It is the opportunity here on earth and in the universe to be courageous. And that is this path. And it's exciting. It doesn't have to be scary. It is scary, but it's about moving into the scary and the fear. But basically, just by definition, when we're not on a path, basically we're finding the easiest way to try to get through life with not being courageous, to push our fear and everything else on to other people and say, you deal with this. And basically what we are doing is we're just trying to ignore the things that make us uncomfortable. And that, by definition, is our ignorance. What we ignore is our ignorance. And it shows up in what we socially call arrogance. It is arrogance. It isn't just the narcissist who is arrogant. It is the codependent who is arrogant as well, because the codependent pushes their fear just like the narcissist pushes their fear out. And so what we're doing in Lenzafarianism, instead of saying, trying to look at that's the thing about the psychology. When we take that path and we can see how ridiculous it is in our popular psychology, it's great. It's so great to see how ridiculous it is that, people who take the path of psychology start reading about narcissists, and then they become narcissists themselves by analyzing other people and again ignoring their own work and putting it on everybody else. It's the villain. It's them. They're the ones that are making me scared. Whatever else. But this is exciting. This is an exciting prospect, because right now I was thinking about how when I started my journey, and I look back at how so many spiritual awakenings and trying to get to the thing that I knew I wanted to progress to, which was love. I wanted to be part of the love train. I wanted to bring kindness and love and warmth and all of these things, and I struggled with it. And I recognize that now, because when I was growing up, and even in my spiritual journey, we really put up with a lot. In order for us to kind of feel safe, we put all of our interest into buying things and keeping the economy good. And so things like life, it's not for everybody, but even for somebody like me, grew up lower socioeconomic, I was able to, kind of rise above that. And it was easier. And because the big part was that I couldn't see how hate worked very well, because our political systems were not all that, they weren't that heavy against each other. It was like, it wasn't that big of a deal to pick one side or the other side. They were pretty close. And now that they're apart, it is just so much easier to see how we just didn't we were soft. We all took the easiest path away. And so it was kind of like, I think of it as, it's easy. It's the easier thing to see. So it was like, I think of myself as like, when I was trying to figure out love, the outside world made it like I was up to bat against all like 10 Hall of Fame pitchers with 25 different perfect pitches. So even when I was looking for love, it was like I didn't know which pitch was coming, and it was so hard. And now, with how nutty things are, like how in your face everything is, a lot of people are just really discouraged by this, but there's another way to look at it this way, is the universe has said, hey, this is how hate works. Feeding hate with hate is how hate grows. It's like the universe or God or whatever you want to call it is like, now it's not these Hall of Fame pitchers anymore pitching it at us anymore. It's like God taking a giant softball and slow pitching it to us and going, okay, we're going to slow everything down. You could really see how love works. If you want to be part of the love train, you are going to understand how to not feed hate. And so, I had a little chuckle over that. So it's right there in front of our face, and it's very tangible. And it's so much more tangible. And the imprinting with the trauma and the healing, to look at it without the story and getting the practice. And that's the thing with Lenzafarianism. We just make the definitions of things so much more clear, that if the words I feel come out of your mouth, if they come out of my mouth as a Lenzafarian, they better be feelings and not stories about the feelings. And I kind of have a little trick when I hear myself say I feel like this, when I'm a little agitated. It happens with Chelsea. I will say, I feel like you aren't doing blah blah blah. I just trick my mind and I say, I feel like you're the asshole. And I just get over all the stupid story I talk about, of not making the coffee enough or whatever it is that might be what emotionally's got me settled. So if we are on an awakening path, the fastest way to do that, and the best way and most efficient way to do that, is to get out of the stories, to get into the sensory being who we are. And so if we're talking about feelings, then we say, I feel grief. I feel sadness. I feel heaviness. The sensation that's actually happening in you, and not the story that derives from it. And there was one little last piece that I wanted to share around spiritual ahas, and as we awaken, what is this awakening thing? And once you start on your path and you start to it's kind of like you're stuck. I love this analogy. If we think about all these imprints, this is just simply what we didn't know. We didn't know that we got tangled up in all of these knots by all of these imprints that were happening to us, and it was how our reaction. So it's like it's a ball of yarn. I love this. And when we get on our awakening path, we can recognize that we just have this ball of yarn that is all tied up, and it needs to be unfurled. And so as we're awakening, we're doing that. That's the process. And we have, I've had hundreds of spiritual ahas or awakenings. And there's been little ones where I'm just like, I feel lighter. Something just drops in. You have these downloads that you don't even know where they're coming from. And so many times I thought, oh my gosh, I'm awake now. And then you think you got over something, and then down the road, poof. It's like my mentor used to say, you feel like you got the badger in the bag, and then the badger makes its way out. And that's the whole idea of spiraling. But another way to visualize these ahas is to just understand that you're just going to have them. Like, that is what awakening is. That we are just going to have these ahas, and again, to not tell stories, try not to tell stories about them. But one of the visuals that I love is, it's like a membrane. And if we just think that we're just carrying all of this ignorance with us, what we don't know, and it's like, that's the unconscious, what we don't know. And the awakening, the aha moment, is the moment we step through this membrane, and it's like our eyes open and we see. And what we can say is that when we're awakening to our ignorance. I am lighter. I see more. I know more, and I understand more about the world. But the idea is that this journey of walking through this membrane is going to keep happening. And for me, it was like, I wanted a damn finish line. And I thought I really had one in 2020. And that was my ignorance. and you just don't recognize it. And that's the idea, is to have such a beautiful relationship with that understanding, with the unconscious, is the greatest release mechanism that ever happened along the way. Having those awakenings when I thought I had the badger in the bag, and then the badger came out again, and I would get upset about it. And I'm over that. Or, well, gosh, that could be my ignorance right there. But I can tell you that I practice, and Chelsea can say it, that I love walking through membranes now. I love holding my ignorance and understanding that my ignorance is going to exist. That's what this plane of existence is about, is ignorance into the light. And you could call your ignorance darkness into the light. Again, we can make stories about that kind of thing, and that could take us into duality and blah, blah, blah. So, to wrap things up, that's Lenziforianism is about making things, making it less abstract, the awakening journey, making it a lot more fun, finding the most powerful point of view, understanding that what we want, our ignorance, is going to cause us to live within static belief systems, to understand that what we want is a dynamic belief system. I sit here saying that you can suggest anything to me, and I will take any suggestion that will make this experience on Earth a better one. And that is a dynamic belief system. that I do not have to hold on statically to any kind of belief. I want everyone's influence to make my experience and make others. I just assume that it makes other people's experiences better. Is because we take on, that's the spiritual journey, is we step in as much as we can possibly do it to bring light in, like knowing, like turning on lights in a room, like literal lights. The ignorance is, oh, hey, there's this room and there's all kinds of cool things in here. And stepping in with and looking at and loving our emotional guidance system. And that's like one of the big leaps, is to understand we get mad at ourselves for being sad. We get mad at ourselves for being afraid. We get mad at ourselves for being angry. Though we can throw that in the trash. We're not doing that anymore. We are looking at and loving our emotional guidance system, because it is the thing that is our guidance system. That is what is helping us along the path. And it is amazing. All the emotions do is it's like the sailboat. When we are in the light, we are still being guided by emotions and our ignorance. But we don't usually notice it until an emotion arises. Well, if we just think about a sailboat, and when we are feeling and we are present, that's when we know we can be present, because we're conscious and we have the sail in it, and we can feel the trajectory of the sail bringing us through time. And the emotional guidance system will say, oh my goodness, the wind has shifted. So it's my work to rest in the emotion and to find out bring that piece of ignorance to light. And then we're just readjusting our sail, and on we go. And this system becomes, at first, it's big. We have these big shifts, these big moments, big understandings. And then after a while, these shifts become much more nuanced. Our emotions are not these huge things. Like I just don't have these emotional problems, and just I have funny problems, like my last haircut was me readjusting my mind, because I had the haircut that I loved, and then all of a sudden somebody wiped that out of my lifetime, and then I was just like, okay, I got to look at this from a different lens. And it's just me adjusting and you adjusting. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. If you guys have questions, please reach out. Lenzifarianism is growing, and we're understanding it better and better every day. We know how powerful this is. The people that are jumping on board are just giving us lots of great feedback. But we want to know from your personal experiences, what can make this better? What would you like to hear? Anyway, hope you're having a great day.